All right, welcome back to Beneath the Helmet. I'm your host, Arjuna George, former fire chief turned leadership coach, theory provider, author, and podcast host. So if mastering team building, team cohesion is of interest to you, this episode is definitely a must listen. Today on Beneath the Helmet, I get the opportunity to sit down with Assistant Chief and Dr. Johnny Torgerson. He's a leadership expert and also the author of Forging Your Team. He essentially shares a very solid blueprint for forging an amazing team within your organization. But before we jump in, please subscribe to the channel, like us on YouTube. The more people that get to listen to Beneath the Helmet, the more impact we can make across the world, and the better for our first responder community to serve their communities better and ourselves better. So Johnny's story is not just inspirational, it's definitely very actionable as well. If you've ever struggled with team cohesion issues, recruitment and retention issues, or even just that crew that just does not click, this episode is a must listen. So let's get into it. Until next time, stay well.
It's time to ignite your soul and unlock your full potential. Join us on Beneath the Helmet, the podcast exploring firefighters' health and wellness. Hosted by retired Fire Chief Arjuna George, our podcast is the perfect place to start your journey towards becoming the best version of yourself. So come on, let's join the conversation and find out what sets your soul on fire.
All right, welcome back to Beneath the Helmet, everyone. Very excited to have you join us today. I'm your host, Arjuna George, and today I get a chance to sit down with the author of Forging Your Team. I get to sit down with Assistant Chief and Dr. Johnny Torgerson. Welcome to the show, Johnny.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate you, Chief.
Awesome. So tell our listener today a little bit about who Johnny Torgerson is and your background and what brought you to writing this book.
Yeah, thanks. So me, I'm married, have a wife of the last 22 years, and I have three daughters, three amazing daughters. Each one of them has just some special abilities. My oldest daughter, she's a nurse and married and has two amazing children. Uh, I'm a grandparent now, and I'll tell you what, I've discovered that the whole point of having children is to have grandchildren, because that's where it's at, baby. Like, oh my gosh, it is
Can't
a
wait.
special relationship. Yeah, you're gonna truly enjoy it. And the thing is, I've heard it before, but I didn't really understand it, and so now I do. And it's funny, like I would see, my parents and my wife's parents just totally doting over our children, never understanding why, like they were just so fascinated in love with our kids. But now I get it. Now it's just like, oh my gosh, like it is a special relationship. And so I love it. Love being a grandparent. My middle daughter, she um, plays like 8 different instruments. She's studying to be a nurse right now. She wants to go into the military as an officer in the medical field. And so she's starting out and doing the nursing thing. And each one of those daughters graduated valedictorian, just super, hardworking kids. And then my middle daughter, she's following the same, or my youngest daughter, she's following the same path. It's just a pleasure to be a part of, their life and their legacy. And so, yeah, that's the family life. Professionally, I'm an assistant chief with the NCW Barstow Fire Emergency Services. Been there since 2005, and started off my career in the Army as a military firefighter. So did that for 4 years, and did a contract stint as well. Went to Uzbekistan as a contract firefighter. And so that's a synopsis of the fire career.
I'd love to hear what brought you to go through school to such a degree where you got your doctorate. What was the drive behind that school and that education for you?
Yeah. I think what it comes down to, Chief, is surprising yourself. Like growing up, like I was like a C and D student. It's just like, I didn't pour any effort into education at all. Didn't really, had no appeal to me. And so knowing that and knowing what we're told, that, you're told from a very young age that like, hey, if you don't apply yourself in school, you're going to amount to nothing. And so I didn't apply myself. And so, you just kind of have this presupposition of, okay, well, I'm probably not going to amount to anything now. And what I found out was that the equalizer in life is just hard work. I'm not a smart person by any stretch of the imagination, but ask my wife, she'll tell you the honest truth about that. That's for sure. Or anybody who knows me, I don't have much of the way of talents. Right. And so, knowing that, being honest with yourself, knowing yourself, you kind of put yourself in a box. And I think many of us probably have that same story. And so, um, becoming, or achieving the doctorate level is, once you start kind of like building momentum in life and you start surprising yourself, you start to see like, oh man, like literally, it sounds cliche to say, but if there's anything I want to do, there's nothing in this world that is going to stop that achievement. And, and so, yeah, I just kept surprising myself in life with, multiple different types of achievements and goals. And every time I reached a new goal, it'd be like, okay, well, that's done. Let's move on to the next thing. And that ultimately, at least for the educational aspect of my life, it led to, yeah, I'll just go get my doctorate. And it just kind of like, yeah, I'm just going to do that because that's cool. And I enjoyed what I was learning too. That also was a driving factor. It's not just like, you don't just do that for the degree itself. It's what you get out of that and how you can help other people with that. And so that's a driving factor. And then the goal orientation thing. And then you wind up, just doing amazing things.
Well, love to hear what you learned about yourself going through that education process. I'm sure that was years and years of schooling and education. What you learned about yourself, that like the biggest takeaway from that self-reflection?
Yeah. I think the biggest takeaway would be, uh, I'll give you a little story. And that is, I was in the middle of my dissertation. And when you're doing your dissertation, like it's broken up into pieces. Like there's these things that you need to achieve, like steps. And so, uh, while I was in the middle of one of those steps, which was, creating kind of like academic rigor, uh, I had to write, a lot, do like when my research was done, I'm like applying these principles and putting all these things down on paper and there's deadlines you got to meet. And so like, I'm going through this process and in the midst of it, uh, it gets wiped out on my computer. Like stuff doesn't get saved. And so, now I'm doing like all this research and spending all this time just to try and retrieve this lost data. And, so I buy software, I just do all these things to try and get this back. And I can't retrieve it. It is gone somewhere in the oblivion. It's probably somewhere. I don't know. But I couldn't retrieve it. Not on my computer, not in the cloud, just gone. And so, mind you, to give some context to this, like a lot of these pieces, they're 60 hours worth of work, at least, just for these little sections of it. And and so this was no different. And so losing this, and being proud of what you have, because now you got to try and replicate the magic that you had, like this great piece of work that you did and it's gone. So like there's that, like, okay, how do I do just as good of a job? And then the whole like spending time doing it and then meeting the deadline. So anyways, going back to the story, I spend about an hour or so complaining to my wife, like just devastated. And she's a sweetheart. She's trying to help me figure it out. She knows how devastating it is. And I have this moment of like, forget it. Like I got so much going on in life. Like, can't do this. Like maybe I'll just start over another next semester or something. Like you just start having these feelings. And, and then I just had this overwhelming thought. And that was, no, nothing's going to stop me. In fact, I'm not getting any sleep tonight. And what took me 60 hours, I'm going to do in the next 12 hours. Because, I do have some of the thought processes are there. I have some of the pieces of the puzzle. So I am able to shrink some of that down. And by the morning time, I'm going to have those complete no matter what it takes. And I had work the next morning too, hour and a half drive getting to work. And so that was just the mentality I took. And by the time the morning hit, gosh darn it, it was done, and it was a really good piece of work. And I was, proud that, I didn't give up, and no matter what the challenge was. And so, from a personal aspect, going through the process and what it takes to receive a doctorate, it challenges you in, many different facets. And, when you reach the end of that and you see that you can do it, what it really does is it sets you up with the mindset of, literally, if you ask me, hey, I want you to, in the next 5 years, build a skyscraper, even though I have no idea how to do it, I'm going to find a way. Not that I'm going to do it all myself, but we'll be getting contractors, we'll be getting loans. It's a loose point, but you really get to a point where you feel like there's just literally nothing that can stop you in life.
Helpful. So for the listener right now who's like, I really want to go back to school, but how do I manage this on top of everything else in my life? What was your key strategy to maintaining relationship with your wife, your kids, working still, commuting, and doing this very intensive schoolwork?
Yeah, man, that's a loaded question, Chief. I think there's always sacrifice, and the problem is most of that sacrifice isn't coming from you. Um, you can't serve two masters, and so there, uh, there's going to be you're not going to do as well at work, and that doesn't mean you're not doing a good job at work. It just means if you're an overachiever, you're not going to be overachieving as much. If you're a really engaged dad, as you should be, you're not going to be as engaged much, because that time you would normally allot for playing soccer with your kids, you're sitting on a computer, or you're going to, class. And so I think it's, understanding that, all those different things in your life, if you're trying to do them all the same, you're going to fail. And so, as far as others having, making those sacrifices, the key to that is the relationships and everything you do front work before you start the process. If you already have a rocky marriage, if you're already a disengaged person with your kids, if you're already not an overachiever at work, and then you're adding on to this and you're saying sacrifice, that's where the failure comes. And so, I think what helped me was, having those good relationships and, already setting the bar high for me. So when things aren't going to be, they're not going to get the same product from me in every, angle that is of my life, it's still not going to be a negative deficit. And so, at least that's my perspective on it. Right or wrong on that, I don't know. But,
Great point.
reflecting back, I think that's what helped.
Yeah. So it's not a ditch everything, ditch my family, ditch work, focus on school. It's a bit of balance. It's a bit of ebb and flow. Sometimes it's going to be more school. Sometimes it's going to be more family life. But as long as it's not overly weighted on one end for a long duration, right? Is that how you capture that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the low hanging fruit is balance. The one so that, but when we say balance, it's what type of balance that looks like. And, uh, if you're not already an overachiever, if you're not someone who is engaged and intentional about everything you do, and, uh, do that that's just who you are. And then adding this onto your life, you're going to have just a lot of issues. And so you, I would say, in order for you to accomplish, when your life's already going and you got all these different things that are already happening, uh, it is, I would say, you're going to drop a lot of balls if you're not already used to juggling a lot of balls. And so that's kind of the advice, is like, hey, it's not meant for everybody. So it's more than balance, because you can balance it, right? But you're still not able to achieve it. You're still not able to do it because you're not used to that type of workload. Your family's not used to that type of workload. You weren't set up for uh, doing something that's going to take as much effort and diligence and sacrifice in the middle of your life. You're just not set up for it. And so it's literally not made for everybody. So that would be my point, is like, hey, you already have to set yourself up for success. You already have to have the relationships that are already there. And you have to have the mindset and kind of routine lifestyle that is conducive to tackle such a thing. Because just to tell people like, oh, okay, just make sure you're balancing things. It's not for everybody. And that's just the cold hard truth.
Yeah, I agree 100%. How would you respond to this question, or this statement, I should say? I'm an employee of the fire service. All my education, all my training should be provided by the fire service. I shouldn't have to invest my own personal money in educating myself. How do you respond to that statement if somebody said that to you?
Yeah, I think that's a well, this is what I'll say to that. I would say, if I were to take that at face value, meaning you don't want to have any type of skin in the game, uh, then you're already going to fail the process, because the money part of it is honestly the easiest part. And so like, it's that other part we just talked about. It's hard. And so if you can't even put skin in the game for the money, I doubt you're going to be very successful with all the other stuff, because that's the true sacrifice. And so, so yeah, but people not trying to find a way to get educated and do that as cheap as possible, as free as possible, I'm all for it, man. I did the same thing. I working for the federal government. They have how that was paid. I'll be very transparent about it. Is they have what they call an academic degree program in the Department of Defense, and as long as you can tie that degree to how it will help the Department of Defense, then they will pay for your college degree. You have to make sure you give time back, and there's, you sign a contract with all this other stuff. But yeah, the Department of Defense paid for my education, and I didn't even know that program was out there. And I think that's a lot of things that people run into, is not really understanding the tools that are at their disposal to help them get their education on the financial end. And so, yeah, I would say, if to answer your question more succinctly, Chief, is if your mindset is, I shouldn't have to put skin in the game because I shouldn't have to have any sacrifice, and I would say you're wrong and you're already set up for failure. If your mindset is, hey, I would like to try and do this as cheap and as economically as possible, what's out there for me, then I would say absolutely that's the correct mindset. You need to do that. So,
Yeah, no, I'd agree 100%. It's just a little pet peeve I have of some people I've seen over the years, right? Of going through the fire service, and they're like, I'm employed by a fire service. You give me the training. I'm not going to go pay for it myself. And it just kind of irks me a little bit of, I think you need to invest in your own leadership, your own style, your own education. If the department's not going to give it to you, there's ways, either free, cheap, or you pay for it, right? So,
yeah.
uh,
So it's funny you bring that up, Chief, because I think it's actually really, it's much deeper than the superficial kind of like um, view we can look at it as. And here's at least my opinion on it. And that is, the way we are raising kids. And I say we are raising kids because I'm part of this generation that's being raised. Like, I have a 24-year-old. And so, um, when we're getting new firefighters, I literally, I have the same age, that I've raised. And so I can't complain. And I don't mean like that you're complaining. I just mean, I can't say much about that generation when I look at these new firefighters come in and they act the same way my daughters did. And so the reason why I say that is because our generation, 40s, early 50s, the latchkey generation, um, was raised to find ways to get stuff done. Both parents are at work, like um, they're just not as engaged as how we as parents parent today, where uh, when my kids come home and they need homework, I'm there with them, helping them with homework. When my kids need to go to soccer practice, they were dropped off at soccer practice. When I did homework as a kid, and that's when I did homework, because my parents were at work, uh, I had to find out ways. I would call a buddy, hey, you got the answer for this? Or I just wouldn't do the work. He's like, I don't know how to do it. Whatever, I'll just go play outside. Um, I walked to soccer practice or whatever. And so, um, it's, it's, it's no surprise that, this generation, what you're talking about in the fire service, we're like, yeah, what do you mean that you need to provide this for me? They've been provided that stuff their entire life. I provided that stuff for my daughters their entire life because how we equated it was love. Like, hey, love is action. And if I can do it, why would I not do it for my child? And so you have an entire generation, right, of kids that are now working class that were raised by mostly latchkey parents that tried to fill gaps that they had in their childhood of disengagement with full on helicopter like engagement. And it creates a certain type of thinking. And so, and here's another example, and that is firefighters expect a family type atmosphere. But when you'll see that family is a big deal. They want more time off. They want, they're not looking to work overtime. Everything is very much family centric and being home with their kids and being good parents, right? Than it ever has before. And so that's why we're having issues with people going into the fire service. It's not conducive to raising a family like that. It's not. And so when you have parents that were very close to you, that were very engaged and they're in every aspect of your life, dictating your schedule on what you're doing versus us, we dictated our own schedule. Like, hey, we're going skateboarding at 3:30. My parents are still at work. uh, that's, there's those worlds are colliding right now in the fire service. And then we say like, oh man, why are they always trying to do time trades and get time off? And, why don't they want to come in and use their time off to do extra classes? I did that stuff. My buddy did that stuff. That's what it takes to do the job. Completely two different cultures, that are smashing into each other right now. And so us in the fire service, we can't complain about recruitment retention. We can't complain of firefighters having apathy and doing nothing about it from a leadership perspective. And so that's where I push back. And that's really kind of the heart of the book is we got to think differently. We got to lead differently because the people that are in the fire service now are demanding it and they're not going to be there. They're not going to stay there unless we change what we do. And that's important.
It's funny you picked up the generational thing because my experience is actually the Gen X generation, not the millennials or Gen Zs or whatever that's coming into the workforce now. I was actually in my mind, I was thinking more the Gen X that I'm part of myself, right? Where I've just seen that, and that attitude in the fire service just kind of irks me a little.
Mm-hmm.
Just give me everything, right?
No, 100%. And mind you, my boss and I, we talk about it all the time. Like, oh man, like, geez, and he's like, how do we get people just to be engaged? And so, and then that is just a microcosm of the apathy of like, man, you can't even pour into yourself, like, so I get it. I totally get it. But I do think there's a reason behind it. And that's where, at some point we need to, question how we approach these things as opposed to just being like, oh man, this is ridiculous. Like they're never going to get it. Like, and you just try and hire someone else and you find they have the same mentality and you're like, oh my gosh, it's done. The sky's falling.
Because the generation before us complained about us, I'm sure, right?
100%.
Beautiful. So let's dive into some leadership and talk everything teams and your book. So I want to start off with the book. How did that come to fruition? What was the spark that made this book come to life?
Yeah. So, uh, I think what we do as organically as humans is we put ourselves in these boxes. And we do that by, uh, copying what we've seen, because that's just what we know. And so that puts us, in this box. And then, we have our own thoughts of our capabilities and what we can do. And, so from the things we hear, see, and what we believe about ourselves, we, um, limit how we behave on a daily basis. And what I noticed with this is that it's pervasive in the fire service. We put ourselves in these silos of how we operate, because this is, like the whole cliche, this is what we've always done type of thing. Even people that understand that, even people that have had like bad leadership before, they will truly, it's funny, it's the craziest thing. They'll still lead like the person that they were just saying like was a terrible leader. They will do a lot of the same, and you look and you're like, how is this even happening? But it happens all the time. And it's because it's what you, at the end of the day, it's what you know. And so you fall back to that. It becomes your modus operandi if it's the only thing you know. And so the fire service, that's what it's done. And so one of the things it's done, and how the fire service has put itself in a box, is it borrows things. And it borrows things because the fire service is a money pit. It's not there. It doesn't have the ability to like go out there and pay money to innovate and pay people to do research. We're a money pit for cities and the government. And so that isn't there. And so how the fire service is adapted is, oh, the people that do innovate, the industries that are coming up with new stuff, we try those things and like, oh, cool, this is applicable to my fire department or this scene or this incident. And then we start adapting and using those things. And so it's worked really well for the fire service. It's one of the amazing success stories of our job. When you think of like the KED, the Kendrick's extrication device, it came from NASCAR. We didn't invent that. Same thing with our hydraulic equipment, NASCAR. A lot of our rescue tools, came from the construction industry. Our SVA comes from the mining industry. And so we've adapted these things to our industry. And one of the things that we have also adapted is leadership, is team development. And I believe one of the things that has not worked for the fire service is borrowing these concepts and saying, oh, since leadership is universal, it must work in the fire service. And at least in my experience, it didn't translate well. And it's because I was given the opportunity in the department where I work to experiment, to try all these things that they teach you in school on how to develop teams and how to change cultures and how to change organizations and how to lead people and how to manage and stuff like that. And yeah, not a lot of it was transferable. Um, and yet, but that's what we do. And so even though we know a lot of this stuff doesn't work, and going back to my first point, we still do it because it's all we know. And it just keeps, getting filtered into these fire officer books and regurgitated by fire officers and round we go. But while all that's happening, we have a huge recruitment retention problem. We have, like we just talked about, apathy within the fire service. We have a mental health crisis that's happening. All that stuff is happening because of lack of leadership. And so that's why I wrote the book, is because everything can be blamed on leadership. And that is the people who's in charge and their influence over others to transcend behavior and make a great work environment, to provide people job satisfaction, to truly develop a team in the fire service, in your department. And so, yeah, the book came from that.
So the Forging Teams is the name of the book, and you talk about a forging process. You want to dive into that and kind of share that process and what that looks like to forge a good team?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think first, before starting that process, it's understanding why we should have that process. And this is a huge gap in the fire service. I think a huge gap in many organizations, but especially in the fire service. And that is uh, being in the fire service, it is not an individual sport. I think we can all agree on that. Like, it is a team sport, but how we view that team sport is at the small unit level. And that's what I'd like to share with your audience is the, it's not at the company level or your truck crew or your rescue crew or whatever small unit team you have. It's at every level of the organization. And where leaders go wrong in organizations is they think that they need to lead levels way below them. In fact, they try to. And that's not leadership. That is management. Leadership is based on who you are. Management is based on what you are. You're right. Right. And so when it comes to, let's use the extreme examples, when you're a fire chief, and then that's one area, and then you have firefighters, you're not in a leadership level for them. You're at a command level. You dictate things, you tell things. You don't have the relational influence to influence any one of those firefighters on a personal basis. You have what we call, or what I call in my book, distinctive influence, meaning you can still influence them, but it's not relational based. It is based on, distinctive characteristics. So like if, you exude confidence, if you're an empathetic person, people can be influenced by that. That's why people are influenced by Hollywood stars. There's distinctive qualities there that they want to emulate. And so that can make someone change their behavior. But that is nowhere near as influential as the person that has your ear every day, the person that talks to you, that is laughing and crying and you're depending on them. That's what we call proximal influence. Someone that is within a sphere of influence that truly can change your behaviors. And so, so why is that important? Why is understanding that important? Because what we wind up doing is we're trying to lead uh, in a way that's ineffective. How you need to lead is based on your direct report. So if you're a fire chief, your only leadership that you need to be doing is with your deputy chiefs and your assistant chiefs. I don't know, your organizational structure, but whoever's falling under you, that's your team. No one else is your team. Now, mind you, your entire organization is a team, right? I get it. But when we talk about making a difference, you make a difference in a few people's lives. And then those people that they're in charge of, they work on their team. So those assistant chiefs, they work with their division chiefs or they work with their battalion chiefs or whatever. And then the battalion chiefs, they work with their group of captains in their district. And then the captains, they work with their firefighters. And then within that, there's these kind of like smaller teams. So like if you're a captain, you're actually part of 3 teams. You have the organizational team, that's the big, like, hey, we're all one big team, one big family, but you have less impact on that. But then you have your leadership team, and that is, hey, your battalion chief that's over you and all the rest of the captains. Y'all need to be on the same page. You need to be building a leadership team. That way you guys are all sending the same message, doing the same stuff, not working against each other and like, hey, this is how our engine does it. No, this is how our truck does it. That you hear pervasive across the fire service. That's a lack of a leadership team. And then there's your actual team, your direct reports. And so if you as an individual will focus just on building your team, everything else takes care of itself because everyone else does that in their capacity. And then all of a sudden you have this magical organization that has a truly inspirational culture. And so I think that before we get into like, hey, here's the steps, you need to start with that team mentality. And that is the fire service. It's not about leadership. It's about team development, and leadership is the vehicle for team development and team building. So, so with that said, okay, well, that's all fine and dandy, but how do you build a team? And what I've discovered, and this doesn't get talked about a lot, or I haven't heard about it, at least anybody say it. But team building is a change management process, and that doesn't get talked about a lot. And the reason why that's important is because as long as you understand the change management process, it helps you go through the process of team building in the correct mindset. And so the reason why it's a change management process is because anytime you're building a team, that's all it is it literally every aspect, all the constructs of team building is change. It's change for those individuals. Whether you get a new captain, you get a new battalion chief, they're going to have a new way of acting in certain situations. They're going to respond differently on calls, and they're going to talk differently to you. They're going to have different expectations of you. They're going to have a different vision for the crew. Like all these different things, your relationship will be different from one captain that you have to another captain. All it is change. And then within that, you have other members. It's not all about the leader. You have other, people that are part of your team. And so the entire thing is change. And so if you want to build a team, you need to understand how to apply change management principles to a team building approach. If you do that, you can actually develop a team. And here's the next thing I'll say. And this goes back to this generational gap thing. And that is teams in the fire service can't look like a team in a cubicle, like a sterile office environment. They need to look like families. And I know it sounds like a cliche thing to say, but it truly is that. And the reason why is because if we want to keep people in the fire service and we say, hey, I know family is a huge value for you, but you need to give half your life to this other place that has no family values, they're going to quit. They're going to have mental health crises. They're going to be apathetic to coming to work because it's not a value, and value drives attitude, and attitude drives behavior. And so it's a simple psychological phenomenon. And so our teams in the fire service need to look like families. And in order for that to happen, you need to have a leader that has the skill set to develop a family type atmosphere with all the millions of different things that you get onslaughted with as a leader in the fire service. And there's a lot on you. And so, the 4-step process, what I found out with this change management process to build a team is it looks much like making a horseshoe. So when you're making a horseshoe, it has to be forged. Like you just start out with this chunk of metal. And then all of a sudden you need to hey, I need to make a utility out of this. Like I need to make it into a tool. And so that process is a 4-step process. And that is, you need to heat the metal. You need to, after you heat it, then you need to shape it. And then after you shape it, it needs to be cooled in a bath of water. And then once it's cooled, you need to refine it. You need to polish it. You need to add a handle to it. You need to sharpen it if it's an axe. So that's the polishing part of it. And when you're building a team, it looks exactly the same way as far as that change management process to go from a cold, hard chunk of metal to a horseshoe that's usable and able to do its job. And so, so to break that down even further, the heating process, we are all just cold, hard chunks of metal. None of us like change. And that's actually a good thing. And the reason why humans don't like change is because with change comes insecurity. With change comes the unknown. And I don't know how to predict behavior. I don't know how to predict what's coming next. So I can't stay ahead of this thing. It's a survival thing. And so we naturally just gravitate away from change. But obviously, as you know, change is a good thing, even though it's a survival instinct and it's something we do to protect ourselves, protect our hearts, protect our bodies. So it's a mental, physical, emotional thing. Change is also a good thing because that's how we adapt. That's how we get better. And so those two worlds collide. And that's why it's change management and all that stuff. Like they're just hot button type topics because that's the collision. It's something that is helpful for us, but something that we don't like but for good reasons. And so with knowing that we are resistant to change, but we need change, what does that look like? What does it look like to heat something up that's not metal? And what I discovered is that so let me back it up. People will change when there is some type of big event that happens in their life, something that is impactful. And some of those things might be death, right? Like experiencing, a tragedy in your family, a tragedy with a close friend. That changes people. Divorce is another one. Divorce is running rampant in first responder industry. Uh, that I've seen it firsthand. It changes people because it's an impactful thing that's happening. And so you'll see it'll change people for the good, because they'll take one approach, or it'll change people for the very, very bad. But outside of that, people don't change. Like, you are who you are. Like, your values don't change. And so that's why you'll see values being attacked so much in the fire service, is because they know if they want to change a behavior, they got to go all the way to your core values for any of that stuff to happen. Well, look, that is a waste of time. I'm going to go off on a quick little tangent here. You're not changing people's values. So every fire officer that's listening to this, just stop. You're not changing their values. Um, People's core values. I can go take an 8-hour lecture on why integrity is so amazing. If I didn't walk into that lecture with integrity being a core value to me, I'm not walking out of that lecture and saying, "Oh, you know what? That person's right. I should have integrity." You're just going to go back to you can feel that way, but you're always going to go back to like just what you are. And so, why is that important? When it comes to change management, and building a team, you need to put people in a state where they're conducive to change without having an impactful, life altering event. And what I've found, the only way you can truly do that, to put people in an uncomfortable environment, is to raise the standards so high that they currently are, that they feel uncomfortable every day. And so there's a lot of things that go into that. One, people get confused with raising a standard as change. That's not change. That's not how that works. When we talk about change, we're talking about changing behaviors, by the way. We're not talking about changing processes in an organization. Now, you can change processes in an organization to help influence behaviors, but when we're talking about team building, what we're talking about is raising a standard so people are uncomfortable and they're used to being uncomfortable. And so now they're ready for change. If you don't raise the standard, a standard of excellence, there's no amount of change to people's behaviors that are going to be affected. And so here would be an example. You have a son or a daughter and you want them to do well in school, right? And so as parents, you keep preaching like, hey, do your homework and, pay attention in class and stop goofing off. And so you're trying to change behaviors. That kid never does any of that stuff. And you get frustrated, and now they start getting grounded and stuff like that. That's what we do in the fire service. Is we don't raise a standard. We just try and change behaviors. And it's ineffective. And so how you do that, going back to, your kid in school, is raising the standard would be something like, hey, what I'd like to see is, hey, we're going to put you to bed at 9:00. That's now a standard for you. Like, this is, you're not going to bed at 11 or 12. You're going to be going so you can get plenty of sleep. The other thing is I'm going to make sure that, you spend, I don't know, an hour doing homework every day. I'm making the stuff up as I go along, but meaning the things that they should be doing every day, to help give them a better way of operating on a daily basis, will then change the behavior at school. And so when we are, and maybe that was a terrible example, but the point is when you have SOPs and it's polish your boots, make sure it's tucked in. And I use that as another loose example, and that's a standard, and you're not upholding that standard, and you're trying to change behaviors of people on your team to wanting to be master craftsmen and pour into, being a better firefighter. And you got them to a point where they're tucking in their shirt. Good luck. You're not building a team. And so you need to, and this is the reason why it's important. It's not for the standard itself. I don't care about tucked in shirts and polished boots. It's not about that. I care in the sense of for the public appeal, but that's a very superficial thing. The reason why I care about it is because if we can get people to be in a state of mind where they are ready for change, then we can influence them for some amazing things. And if they're still like, just going status quo, just doing what they normally do, you're not going to influence those behaviors. And so, let me wrap this up for you real quick on this first step. The heating part of this is you need to embody those standards yourself. You need to be a broken record on this stuff. It's what I call message discipline. You need to not tell them the standard for the sake of the standard, but the why they're doing that standard. And the why is always centered on something that is above them. People want to feel special. People want to feel a part of something. That's why we have so many advocate type people in our culture now. It's because they want to be something that's bigger than themselves. They want to be a part of something that is special. And you can provide that by giving them the why. And so it becomes more, it becomes greater. And so in order to raise the standard in your department, you need to, once again, embody it, communicate it, give the big picture of the why, and be vigilant about it. Because I'll tell you what, this is where people fall off and they can't even get there because you're going to get so much hate from it. People don't like it. And it created a lot of friction in my department with me as a captain, a lot where, rumors and like, oh, he's terrible, like just, he sucks. But if you can make it through the you suck phase, right? If you can make it past that, there is a promised land at the end where just like, it's beautiful. And all those people, that were on your team or in your group that said you suck will endear you for the rest of your career. But you got to make it through that. It's kind of like, when you're raising kids, like you're going to say you suck at first, right? And then all of a sudden, they're a nurse or a doctor or a lawyer, and they got beautiful children, and all they're like, oh, you know what? I guess you didn't suck that bad, mom or dad. You made it to the promised land. And so you got to get through this uncomfortable phase. And that's why it's akin to putting metal into a furnace is, it puts that metal in a very uncomfortable environment. The metal wants to stay soft or not soft, it wants to stay cold and hard and stay where it is. People want to do the same thing. They don't want the standard to be raised on. And so, yeah, you need to raise the standard to 1200 degrees and put them in a state that is conducive to behavioral change. And so that moves us to the next piece, and that's shaping behavior.
Before we jump into that one, is there a difference between a crew, team, any other words there? Is that all the same? Crew, a team, a group, cohort, all the same,
Yeah.
same? Or is there a
No,
difference there?
no, I think there's a distinctive difference. We do use them interchangeably,
Mhm.
and academia, I'll have you believe that there's groups and then there's teams. Uh, I think there is an intermediate phase in there, and what I call a crew, and I just threw a name at it just to give it a title. But there's this intermediate step that you go through when you're developing a team, from getting a group of individuals, like a collective of people that are working autonomously from each other. That would be a group. And then a team where they have a shared vision, there's trust. For the fire service, it looks like a family, uh, where you can't wait to even do crappy assignments with them. That's how much you enjoy working with these people. That's truly a team. So when you like look at Band of Brothers, right? Like everyone's seeing that, and you see towards, the end where there wasn't a crappy assignment that they didn't love doing with each other. And what I think the fire service is predominantly made of is that middle group. It's crews where you have a shared vision, but you don't have that family type environment where you can't wait to do a crappy assignment with. There's a select few of individuals have done that. Absolutely. But for the most part, you don't see that in the fire service. And that's what we need. We need to flip the script where it's opposite of that, where the anomaly is not having a team. And I believe we can get there. And we truly can. But we need to be given the correct tools to do that. And it's not the tools that we're getting in our fire officer classes right now. It's not the tools that you're getting in your business management class that you're taking so you can get your degree while you're in the fire service. Like they're not going to give you the tools for it. It's just not there. I'll tell you what though, a shameless plug, you read the book, you will have the tools. You needed to develop those tools, but it's there. It's out there now. And that's why I'm so proud of this work that's out there, and it's only going to get better, and where the word's going to spread and people are going to make this even better. What I gave in the book will be the low part of the bar. And that's what's special about this is um, the, the tools that are given, someone's going to read this book and make it better. They're going to be like, oh, this. And then it goes from there. And now the fire service is getting to where the teams are the majority and not the other way around. But yeah, crews is what I think is a middle ground there. And I think that's what the fire service is made of, and why we have so much apathy and all those other things we talked about.
Another thought just comes in my head when we talk about change management, very classic term that we use in the business world. Do you consider it change management or do you consider it change leadership?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Um, I've never really thought about that actually, and stitch that together. I think that's a great question. I think if I were just answered off the cuff, uh, I would say management, and the reason why I would say it's change management is because, in my view, everything leadership is relationships. And so when I'm leading something, it's based off of my relational influence on somebody. Anything outside of that is management. And here's the reason it gets confused is really successful managers will be confused as good leaders. And it's the reason why is because they manage people to do certain things. If I can get someone to go from point A to point B, people will call that leadership. But how you get person from point A to point B is what separates leadership from management. And so I would say the process itself, what I'm giving, would be a management process, but you need to lead within that process to make it happen.
All right, let's dive into step 2. We're going to
Sure.
heat this iron up. What's next?
Before you start the next step in the process, it's important for everyone to know that don't even try and change people's behaviors until you truly put them at a high standard. Trying to cheat and do it before then, you're not going to change much behavior. So don't move on to step 2 until step 1 is actually done. That's important to note. But once you've achieved that, once you see that your team is setting a high standard for themselves, now it's time to enact some behavioral stuff. And so when it comes to shaping, what we typically try and do is we try and shape behaviors in one fell swoop. We take big blows of the mallet if using the forging concept. And as we know, if I'm trying to turn this piece of metal into a horseshoe, I'm not going to get it in one blow. In fact, I'm probably going to screw it up even worse. And now I just ruined the metal and I got to start all over again. And don't we do that with people where we try and take some big blows and then all of a sudden you lose all equity? You screw up what you're trying to do and you can't even influence them enough because you've lost all credibility. And so when it comes to the second step, it's ensuring that whatever behaviors you want to change, you need to break them down into the smallest increments that you can. And the smaller, the better. And that's what a blacksmith does. It knows where it's going. The blacksmith knows where he's going. He knows what he wants to make. So when it comes to you developing your team, you have to have a vision of where you want to take your team and what you want it to look like. You're going to have certain emphasis on things that other people aren't. And so you need to know that. And then you need to break that down of, okay, how do I get there? What type of behaviors am I looking for in order to get that? And so there's going to be this overview of how you want your team to look behaviorally. And then there's going to be this nuanced look of how do I get my individuals to behave like that on an individual basis? And what changes need to happen to occur in that aspect. And so there's this holistic look, and then there's this individual look. And so you need to figure that out as a leader. And then once you figure that out, now you need to break that down into small steps and be very intentional about those steps and take it as really as slow as possible. And typically that's not very slow with all the pressures that we have on ourselves as leaders. So that's why I say as possible. So that's where you start shaping behavior is standards are set. Now, hey, this is what we're going to do to shape behaviors. We're going to make sure that when things get hard in the department, we don't automatically go to talking crap at the kitchen table and talking bad about another person or talking bad about management. Like those are behavioral changes. Whatever behavioral changes you want to make. Maybe it's having a passion for the craft. Like, hey, some of the behaviors that I want to change, I want a team that lives and breathes firefighting, whatever, right? Okay, what steps do I need to take in order to get my team to where they live and breathe the fire service? So you break that down. And so whatever that may be for you, I don't know. I'm literally just making up on the fly. You figure that out and then you start enacting that in a very patient and slow and methodical way. And this is where a lot of people fall off, to be honest with you. And the reason why people fall off here is because of all the external pressures and how much change there is within your team. So external pressures. Let's say you're a new captain and you get the crew that needs a lot of work. Other crews are performing better than you. There's this sense of urgency from your boss of saying, change this as of yesterday, get your crew with better response times, get your crew to do this. You don't have, in your mind, you're thinking, I don't have time to wait this slow, methodical process of, raising standards and changing behaviors when I need results now. And so that's where people fall off because then they start taking large swings of the hammer. They start skipping, raising the standard, and then change never happens. You never build a team. And so that's where it's difficult. That's where people have to have patience. That's where relationships with your boss are just so critically important. I probably had just as much conversations with my boss on this aspect alone of, hey, give me time. Hey, this is where I'm at with it. I know you're looking for results right now. This is my plan. This is what I'm enacting. You got to have that relationship and be transparent and let them know where you're at. So that way it gives you time to actually do it right. Because what winds up happening is you may win the war, but you may win that battle, I should say, but you're going to lose the war. Meaning that you may be able to appease the boss for whatever tasker you had. But the war of developing this team to a family-like environment, it's never going to happen. That's the shaping part of it.
But just
shaking
for
things.
my own clarity and maybe the listener too, what would be raising the bar? Like, what would be an example of raising the bar that if you were a new captain coming in, what would raising the bar look like?
Yeah. So, uh, for me, it was, um, I attacked much of the engagement part of it. Like, so for me, like what I would tell my firefighters as a captain is come to work ready to work. That's a standard. Like, it shouldn't be a standard, but like, there's plenty of times where, firefighters, they have other hobbies, they have other jobs, they got a lot of life, they got newborns at home. And so they come to work to relax, like, okay, man, I need a break from life and I'm just going to run some calls today. Well, that doesn't push a fire department forward because all fire departments are just a collective of little programs. And so people got to run those programs. Like there needs to, um, work has to happen. It's not just 911 calls. Um, in order for us to be effective, it's really all the 90% of stuff we do before we get to the call. Uh, and that's the fire service. And so you need engaged personnel to make that 90% work in order to be really good at the 10%. And so I needed engaged personnel. And so for me, one of the standards was, hey, when you come to work, be ready to bust your ass because I'm going to accept nothing less. You're not coming to hang out in the recliner and, eat potato chips and watch movies all day and wait for the next call. Like, we're not doing that. We're going to train. We're going to make sure that the station's good. We're going to make sure the rig is checked out and things are spotless. And so I didn't go into each one of those things because when the standard is coming to work, ready to work, everything else falls into that. So I didn't need to attack the whole, like, okay, make sure all the rigs are high and tight. Like, you have those conversations, but that's not the aspect you attack for raising the standard. The standard is that shift in mindset. Hey, when you come to work, be prepared to get it on because we're going to get it on, bro. And how I was able to accomplish that is, especially as a young captain, is I would do the work before they would get out there, or I wouldn't even really, I wouldn't even ask them a lot in the beginning. I would say, hey, come to work, ready to work. But if I needed something done, I didn't have a lot of leadership equity. I would just go freaking do it. I would just, and I embodied that hard work mentality. And then as I developed more influence and better relationships, they would just come do it with me. And so the message was the same. Hey, come to work, ready to work. What they saw with me was the same. Then all it was now was that behavior part of it. And that behavior part of it took care of itself because, hey, my captain's busting his ass. He expect us to bust our ass. Well, we're not busting our ass. We get talked to. And so I didn't need to go say, hey, come mop the floor. They would just go mop it. And so that was the approach I took. And it was much more effective just trying to get people like, hey, you should be doing this. We need a high and tight station. Get out there, mop the floor. I found that to be ineffective.
All right. So we've heated up. We've started to mold this.
Yeah.
How do we build that amazing fire department team / family? What's the third step?
Yeah. And so, what's cool is once behaviors start changing, that's when it starts becoming special. And I had a misconception in getting to this part of, developing a team that I think is really important for your audience to hear. And that is, the legacy aspect of this. What the misconception that I had was that once you influence these behaviors, that this is just who they were. You've changed, that they've changed, right? And your influence has done that. And what I found out is, nope, that's not how it works. Those behaviors were changed while I was an influence on their career and life. But as soon as I stepped away, things would go back to just normal, who they were before. And there's a few things that were involved with it that I found out is, one, it's the reason why they say culture is such an important aspect in an organization. To me, that is how the change solidifies. And for many years, as I was learning these processes in my department, we did not have a healthy culture. And so what would happen is if I got promoted or if went on vacation for a couple of weeks, my amazing group of individuals and team, they would just resort back to whatever was influencing them. So they would have another because I'm not there. So another overtime captain would come in and they would have the influence over my people for the next 2 weeks. And everyone else is not coming to work and ready to work and not training every day and hanging out as a family and eating together and just all those amazing things that you would do as a team in the fire service. They weren't doing that. And so they would just gravitate back to whatever the culture was. And so that's where I learned, man, if you want change to actually take form, to actually solidify, it has to be cooled in a bath of water of what we would call organizational culture. If you don't have an organizational culture that is conducive to the change that you made, as soon as you step away, as soon as they get a new leader, as soon as you get promoted, whatever may happen, when you're not in the picture anymore, they will do whatever the culture is. They're not going to do what you left them doing. And even with that said, there might be one or two that will still try and keep it going. And I'll give one example. I was able to impact a fireman in a pretty profound way. And so when I got promoted, he tried to, and they got a new captain. He tried to do the same exact stuff that we were doing, right? And what he found out is he spent a year just trying to do it. But the organizational culture and his captain had way more influence over the people that were on the team I left than he did. And so that's why I say organizational culture is just so important if you want the change to stay, to solidify. And so there's ways in which that has to happen. And one of those things is out of your control. And that is that whole, what we talked about in the beginning, where every facet, every layer of the organizational structure has to have a team mentality and be doing and setting the tone for all the stuff that you're doing. And so if you are in a situation where you don't have that culture, the only thing you can do is develop a station culture or a team culture, something that is within your influence. But there's a good chance that once you get promoted years from now, if the organizational culture is still the same, that people will resort to, the influence that is around them. The whole, you're a product of your environment. It still holds true to today. And that has an effect on team building and team development. So yeah, it's, if you're at a station, especially a multi, company station, it's working with the other captains to make sure you're on the same page, that leadership team, to where when you step away, and you go on vacation or you get hurt, God forbid you get hurt or something like that, or maybe you have a baby, you're on baby leave, that, your informal leader, your emergent leader, can, keep the team going, and they're not in an environment where, they're swimming upstream, because it's just that same standard and those same behaviors, aren't everywhere else. So yeah, so that's that would be what we call the cooling phase. That's where you solidify. You need to solidify it in a culture that is conducive to the change.
Yeah, well, so many visuals going through my head as you're describing all these. Just it's a very visual kind of analogy and the forging concept, right? So I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they keep popping in my mind is I deal with a lot of officers and chiefs through coaching, and a lot of them struggle with that. Platoon B, Platoon A, Platoon B loves to train. Platoon A is not a big training group. And it kind of just hit me that it's a leadership issue why those officers are not on the same page. It's not necessarily the officers who they need to figure it out, but really it's the leadership above them that needs to figure that group out.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, that's 100%. So, the reason why that happens is if we're talking like, say, ABC, right? A platoon schedule, and all three of them don't have the same standards, the problem is the BC. that BC sets the standard. That BC is the one that molds the behaviors of those captains. And that's why, you're hitting the nail on the head. And where I think you're connecting the dots is, if you're developing the teams at every level of organization, the whole, A, B, C thing of we're all doing it different literally goes away, because it's those BCs that are in charge of those captains that set the standard, that are influencing those behaviors. Now, once again, that stuff doesn't happen overnight, because, you're leading leaders. And so that's another thing that gets talked about in the book, but, leading leaders is difficult. Um, but that battalion chief needs to take a team, um, uh, development, mindset, and, build a leadership team with his captain. So that way they all see like, hey, no, we need to do it. Like, let's reach some compromise. We all need to do it the same way. Um, and how you get there is going to be that person that's in charge of that team. And more than likely, they don't even have an semblance of a team. When that stuff happens, they don't even have we are a leadership team mentality at all. They just have, hey, this is my team, that's your team, and that's your team, and we do things different. And, man, does that, it's just a terrible existence on, organizational culture.
Love it. Okay, we have heated up. We've shaped it. We have cooled it down. And now there's a final part, I think. And that is fine-tuning it, shining it up, right?
You got it. And it's really self-explanatory. We're never there. And, there's all of this, internal and external variables that happen that are just, it's an onslaught on your team. People getting hurt, people going through major, crises in their lives, divorces, and just all kinds of stuff. And then, as far as the job itself, all of a sudden, we have a different mission, because now we have our population almost, just grew overnight, because people were imported in. That's happening to fire departments all over the place, and police departments. The mission changes, people change. And so you have all these things that you have to adapt to as a leader with your team. And so it's a continual process of like, you're never there. And I think, this is where some more leaders can kind of fall off the bandwagon, is like, you need to understand that when you accept a leadership position, you're accepting an indefinite responsibility. And that indefinite responsibility is like, you're never, ever there. And some people can't handle that, because they need a point, they need a finish line. And that finish line is not there. You need to run as if there is a finish line, but realizing that you're never, ever going to get there. And so here's an example of it is, in Delta Force. You've heard of like a special forces group, Delta. One of the things, at least I know this is what they used to do, and I got this from a Delta Force briefing when I was in the Army. One of the litmus tests they use to weed out people that are trying to join that elite squad is, they don't give you a finish line. They just give you the next goal, and you don't know how long you should be taking to get there. You just know that they're watching you, they're judging you, and you better get there quick if you want to beat the next person. And you don't even know how to save energy, because you don't know if you're going 1,000 miles, or you're going at 500 miles, or you're going 20 miles. Because obviously if you're going 20 miles, I'll just sprint the whole time. And if I'm, going 500 miles, I'll back it off. Well, if I'm going, whatever, you get the point. It makes it to where it's this indefinite process. And that's what leadership is, it is an indefinite process where you have new people coming in and out of your team. You have, different external and internal pressures that you're dealing with, new bosses that are getting promoted, changing the game on you with their vision and what they want to do. And you got to lead and develop a team through that. And then once you get there, how do you maintain that thing? How do you maintain it? How do you keep it at a team level? And that's this polishing and refining process, this indefinite leadership game that you're doing.
Love it. Love it. And I think that's the process, right? That is the forging that you've talked about. that whole process?
Yeah. So that's the change management process of building a team. And so there's a bunch of different things that go within that. Um, and I won't go into them because within that, there's your team goes through a cycle. Um, there's 6 pieces of that cycle that I noticed. And that is, there's this chaos phase. These are phase and cycles, right? So it's phases. So there's a chaos phase, there's a controlled chaos phase, there's an erratic phase, an identity phase, a acceleration phase, and a regenerative phase. And so within that change management process, your team is going through these phases of where they're at in the process of becoming a team. So remember, the change management process is just a process. The how we go about that process, there's a visual of that process, and that is the team phases. So within what it looks like and the kind of like the universal approach, that's what we're talking about. But within that, there's skills that need to happen. There's tools that you need to be able to use in order to get through each stage. And obviously, we don't have enough time for that here, but there's a lot more to team development than just that. Like just having that information just kind of gives you a superficial like view of the process, but not actually on how to do it. Because obviously, there's like, hey, this is what a ladder should look like when it's up against the building, and here is what it should look like at if we were to break it down into 4 steps. But within those 4 steps, you have all these movements and functions and commands that you're doing, and we haven't gone into any of that.
I'm curious to hear your one golden nugget of what kills a good team. Boil that down to one event or one trait or whatever that looks like. What would kill a team?
Yeah, I think what kills a team is the leader not being consistent in his message every day. And what I mean by message, it's not just what you say, it's really how you make people feel. Maya Angelou says, it's not what you say, it's not what you do, it's how you make people feel. And so leaders need to be vigilant on being consistent with their message. And so how I've done that is I've simplified that process for myself. That is before I come in to shift, every single shift, doesn't matter. I literally do a mental rehearsal, and that is I need to people every single day. It's my way of being consistent in my behavior so I can make people feel safe, feel valued, and feel like they're part of a family. And simply that acronym, or mnemonic, I should say, is attitude, work ethic, and empathy. I no matter what is going on in the firehouse, no matter what pressure is coming down on me from the top, whatever's happening at the house, I want to make sure that my attitude at work is nothing but joy and positivity and high energy. I want people to see that on a consistent basis, not riding the waves of my life emotionally with me. And I think fire service leaders, they do that a lot. I've seen it a lot where they just come in and it's like, oh, well, you had a bad day at home, or he's having a bad day at work, and you're going on this emotional journey with them, and you're just not a consistent person. And so I think making sure you come into work with the right attitude, no matter what is happening, that is hard. It's hard to do that it's an easy thing to say, but it is a hard thing to be consistent on. And so working on that. And then the next thing is your work ethic. As a leader, you have to be the hardest worker. You have to be the hardest worker. You need to show people that, because at the end of the day, it's still a blue collar job. And there's nothing that people appreciate more in the fire service than someone who just gets after it every single day. And so, you need to get after it every day. It doesn't matter how tired you were putting up a fence around your house the entire weekend. Now you're coming to work and you're just mentally and physically exhausted. Well, that's not fair that they get your leftovers. It's jacked up. No, you signed up for a leadership position. So guess what? Go lead. And so when my captains come in like that, I empathize with them. I try and optimize their day with them. meaning you can still work hard, but there's levels of working hard. Right. And so, hey, just be more efficient and effective with your time today, but you don't need to like go like we can go crazy. Like you can, you know what I'm saying? There's different levels of that. And so you optimize that. And so anyways, come into work, work hard. And then the most important one is being empathetic. And when I say empathy, I don't mean compassion, because sympathy. Oh man, I feel bad for you. I'm sorry you're going through that. You give you my thoughts and prayers. That's it, right? Um, Empathy is where you can put yourself in their shoes and then you do something about it. Whatever's in your control, that is. And so, and that's what really affects you, because that makes people feel that they are valued. And so there's no better way to make people, you want people to feel valued in your organization. Yeah, empathetic leader. And that's why it's talked about a lot now, is being an empathetic leader, is because it creates a situation where you're trusted and people feel valued, and valued people um, will give value back. It becomes a, a multiplier, right? And so a force multiplier. And so, yeah. And so that would be my nugget for every fire officer that's coming in or listening, is go into work and send a consistent message. And for me, that's on people, attitude, work ethic. And
Do you think there's any difference between career leadership and volunteer fire department leadership in regard of building teams in this kind of focus that we're talking about? You think there's a difference, or could you take that same principle and go to a volunteer department and kind of cookie cutter and use that same principle?
yeah. And so, no, I think it is a cookie cutter principle, how you go about doing it. So, because it's human behavior at the end of the day. And so human behavior, no matter, I don't care if you're a volunteer or you're a paid firefighter, uh, those firefighters are still have the same personalities. And so you still have to raise the standard. And if the standard is, for example, hey, we have training on the first Tuesday of every month, or the whatever, and you're part of this organization, you're truly volunteering. We expect you to be here. We expect you to be here because you're part of this organization, and we expect you to be here not only because you're part of the organization, but we also need you. We need you here because we can't do it without you. In fact, we need all of you. We need all hands on deck to protect this community. And so, yeah, that standard still needs to be high. And so it's really how you implement this stuff is the differences. Um, but human psychology is the same. So I would implore people to use the same approach. But how you enact the approach that's where the coaching and the consulting and all that stuff, because there's a lot of nuances that come with enacting this.
Well, Chief, as we come to a close, I want to give you kind of the stage to share whatever is burning in your mind right now that you would feel regret if you didn't share it with the listener right now. Is there anything that's kind of in the back of your mind that maybe I didn't ask you, or that's something you just want to share?
Yeah, something that I want to share, and this is, and only because it's been kind of hot on my mind lately. I'm writing another book on it. It's the self leadership aspect of things, and I think it's an important topic for the fire service right now, is how we go about leading ourselves. We talk about leading teams and how important that is to your department and the fire service. But as far as you and your mental health and your job satisfaction, it's, and then obviously that self leadership bleeds into, actual leadership and team development. It's all connected, but it does start with you, and how you talk to yourself and how you lead yourself every day. And so with that aspect, I would like to just share one thing. And it's been on my mind a lot lately, and that is winning the day or winning the ship. I think we have this, we can easily fall into a pattern of letting the days win, and then those days stack up, and all of a sudden you let the week win, and you're living for the weekend, or you're living for your 4 day. Like, oh man, can't wait for the weekend, or I can't wait for my 6 day. Oh, this has just been a rough week. And we give up on, we give up on the day. And then all of a sudden you kind of got a miserable life, and everyone knows it because you're taking it out on everybody. You're just always cranky. Or even if you're not always cranky, as soon as something like bad happens, you just fall apart. Um, And I think a lot of that happens because we're not leading ourselves. And so I want to give some tidbits on that just real quick, real briefly. And that is if you want to win the day, there's three things you need to do. You need to, one, you need to have a plan for the day. Every day as an individual, and I'm talking about a loose plan. I'm not talking about if you're that type of person and you just formulate plans and whatever, like absolutely. But for the majority of us, for people like me, it's a loose plan. Hey, I want to accomplish this, 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 and this today. Uh, and the reason why that's important is it's being intentional about your day. If you're not in charge of your day, the day's in charge of you. And so you start out being in charge of your day. Like, hey, this is what I'm going to do today. This is what I'm going to accomplish today. Here's the things I always do. Like, hey, I'm going to spend time with my family. I'm going to work out today. I'm going to get these three things done at work. I'm going to pray. I'm going to read my Bible. I'm going to go to church. However you plan your day, you need to have a loose plan for that. Here's the second one, because that's kind of the low hanging fruit. Here's the second one. And this is the one that's most important. You need to be able to reset your day. And this is the reason why this is more important. This is why most people start kind of giving up on their day, giving up on their week, is because instead of resetting, they surrender. And so, for example, you get an onslaught of just bad news in the morning. Just your plan falls apart. Here's my loose plan. I'm like, oh, great. Like this sucks. This sucks. This sucks. I cannot wait for this day to be over. What has worked for me is instead of surrendering the day, I look for an immediate micro win. I don't care how small it is. And I literally go through that in my mind. Be like, no, this day has gotten out of control. I'm going to take charge of my day today. I need to figure out a small win, and I will do that. And I don't care how small the win is. I will find a micro win and I'm going to win. And then once I find that micro win, I literally look for another one and I look for a little bit bigger win. Then all of a sudden I have momentum in my day. And what a day that started out as a catastrophe. I look back and I'm like, oh man, today was awesome. I overcame this. And it puts me just in a different mindset where I'm not surrendering. And then all of a sudden I don't have very many bad days. There could be bad spots in my day, but just to end the day and it just be a complete wreck, it is very, very few and far between. And so I share that because I see it over and over again in fire shows. I see where days just get out of control for people and they give up on it. And all of a sudden, like every day sucks because you literally surrender every day and you don't build micro wins. And the last thing I'll say, to really win the day is you need to reflect on this stuff. It's super important that you celebrate these wins and you reflect on how you overcame them, because that's how you build the momentum in life. It's knowing like, no matter how bad that day was, I literally killed it. I conquered it. I beat its booty. And then that way, when the next day happens, no matter how bad it is, you've already shown yourself that you're a badass, that you can overcome that stuff, and you just go through your process again. So that's been on my heart lately. I think it's important for our fire service leaders to not surrender any day. Take a no, that I will not lose any day. You just like you're not going to lose anybody in a building. Have the same mentality as with your day. Don't lose the day. No surrender attitude. Win the day, and you're going to win in life. I promise you that.
It's probably my go-to passion right now about leadership is about self-leadership. It's something that I've kind of only discovered in the last year or so about really, I think the core to leadership is self-leadership first.
Yep.
It has to be. And you mentioned that as well. And I never really took that into a real definition of leadership and how you start that is dealing with yourself first. I think I've done it organically over the years, but now I have a better understanding that is key to moving forward. You have to start with yourself.
Yeah. Amen to that, brother.
Beautiful. So how can people find your book, Chief?
So I have a website. It's www.forgingteams.com. And on there's links to the book. It's mainly found on fireengineeringbooks.com. They're the publisher of it. And then There's other resources on there, and then you can always get a hold of me. I'm here to answer any questions. It's not like, oh, as soon as you call me, it's 99 cents, per minute. Like, no, that's not the deal here. It's about getting the word out and helping each other. And so, if you have any questions on any of this stuff, send me an email, give me a call, like whatever. I love this. I love this stuff. I love helping people. That's the whole point of leadership, is it's just to pour into people and serve people. And then of course, if you, want me to come out to your organizations, I'm here for that.
Well, it's been a true pleasure. This is a multi-part podcast for sure today.
Yeah.
And what are we at? An hour and a half. So that's awesome. So I just want to appreciate your time and sharing your wisdom, as well as putting this great book out into the world to help us lead better in our organizations. So thank you, Chief. I appreciate that. All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this great episode. I'm sure you had a whack load of notes on what to do next. Be sure to check out his book. It's well worth the read. And until next time, stay well. At the rep.
Right on, Chief.
Awesome.
Thank you for tuning in to Beneath the Helmet. We hope that this podcast has provided you with valuable insights into the world of firefighters' health and wellness. Remember, caring for your physical, mental, and spiritual well-being is crucial to achieving optimal performance. Join us next time on Beneath the Helmet for more inspiring conversations. Until then, stay well.